There were two people in the small house in Nazareth who raised the Son of God. One was the 14-year-old girl who had received the angel in her kitchen. The other was the nearly 40-year-old builder who had taken her into his home when she came back from Elizabeth's house pregnant with a child that was not his. For 30 years, those two people lived together in a small stone house at the edge of a small Galilean village. They raised a son. They woke before dawn. They worked all day. They sat at the same table at sunset. They said the same blessings over the same bread. They watched the same boy grow into the same man, day by day, year by year, for almost 3 decades. And the world has spent 2,000 years remembering the son they raised, and almost nothing about how they raised him. Mary in 1,000 paintings, holding the baby. Joseph in the background, always in the background. Older, gray-bearded, faintly anonymous. Jesus at the center of everything. But that family was 3 people, not one. And every Sabbath table where Jesus would later break bread. Every parable he would later tell about a builder laying foundations. Every word he would later speak about a Father in heaven. All of it came from the small stone house in Nazareth and the 2 ordinary people who built it. This is the story of those 30 years. How Mary and Joseph raised Jesus. The man who said yes to a pregnant teenage wife. The girl who said yes to an angel. The boy who grew up between them. Built from the Gospels, from archaeology of 1st century Nazareth, and from the earliest Christian traditions. By the end of this video, you will understand why those 30 quiet years in a small house at the edge of Galilee built everything that came next. Picture the house. Archaeologists who have excavated 1st century Nazareth have found small Galilean village homes from this exact period. They are remarkably consistent. Cream-colored limestone walls, packed earth floors, 2 small rooms, a main living area, and a smaller sleeping chamber. A flat roof reached by an outside stone staircase. A small enclosed courtyard with a clay cooking oven, a millstone for grinding grain, a few storage jars, a low wooden bench. Joseph's house would have been one of these. Modest, single story, built into the slope of a hill the way most Nazareth houses were, using a natural limestone outcropping as the back wall. The total living space, including the courtyard, was approximately 400 square feet. 3 people would live in that space for 30 years. Mary slept on a sleeping mat next to Joseph's on the far wall. Jesus slept on a small mat in the corner from the time he was a toddler until the day he left at 30. There was a low wooden table for meals. The family ate sitting on the floor or on woven rush mats around it. There was a stone shelf with a few clay cups and bowls. There was a small wooden cabinet Joseph had built for storage. And there were tools. Joseph's chisels, his hammer, his plane, his plumb line, hanging on wooden pegs along one wall of the workshop attached to the side of the house. That was the whole world. 3 people, 400 square feet, 30 years. Their day always started the same way. Joseph woke first, always. He was the man of the house. He was the head of the family. He had work to do. He rose in the cool dark before dawn. He lit the oil lamp on the stone ledge. He walked out to the small latrine he had dug behind the house. He returned. He pulled on his sandals. He drank a small cup of cold water from the clay pitcher. By the time he turned around, Mary was awake. She was already at the grinding stone in the courtyard. 2 heavy basalt stones, one on top of the other, with a wooden handle to turn the upper stone. Barley flour poured out from the gap. She was kneeling over it, both hands on the handle, turning it the way she had every morning since she was 12 years old. Joseph would walk past her into the workshop. He never said anything. They did not need to speak in the morning. 14 years of marriage had made the rhythm completely automatic. She ground the flour. He prepared the workshop. The boy slept. After approximately an hour, Mary would knead the dough. She would shape it into round, flat loaves. She would bake them on the heated stone of the courtyard oven. The smell of fresh bread would rise into the still morning air. And in the corner of the main room, the boy would begin to wake. Jesus woke last. He always did. He was the child of the house. He was allowed to. He would walk out into the courtyard, rubbing his eyes. Whatever age he was at that point, 3, 7, 10, 15, 25. The routine was always the same. He would wash his face at the courtyard basin. He would say good morning to his mother. He would walk over to his father in the workshop. Joseph would lift his head from his work and smile at the boy. Then Mary would call them to eat. Breakfast was always the same. Warm flatbread, olives, olive oil, sometimes dried figs, sometimes a small piece of cheese made from goat milk, a cup of water from the clay pitcher. The three of them would sit around the low wooden table. Joseph at the head, always. Mary on his right, the boy across from them. Joseph would say the morning blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. He would tear off a piece of warm bread. He would dip it in olive oil. He would eat. Then Mary would tear a piece. Then the boy. Then they would all eat together in the soft light of dawn coming through the open courtyard door. Every single morning of his life, Jesus watched his stepfather break the bread and bless it and share it. Every single morning. For 30 years. The gestures he would make at the Last Supper had been built into his hands since he could walk. After breakfast, the day split. Joseph went to the workshop. Mary stayed at the house. For the first 6 years of his life, Jesus stayed with his mother. But starting around age 6 or 7, the boy began going with his father. Picture it. The workshop was attached to the side of the house. A small, open-roofed shelter with 3 stone walls, a wooden bench, and the tools hanging on pegs. The floor was scattered with wood shavings and stone dust. The smell was sawdust and limestone, and the wax Joseph rubbed into the wooden handles of his tools. Jesus would sit on a low wooden stool. He would watch. Every day. For hours. Joseph would show him things. How to hold a chisel, not by gripping it, but by letting it rest in the curve of the hand. How to read the grain of a piece of wood before cutting it. How to test the squareness of a stone with a plumb line and a leveling cord. How to listen to the sound a chisel made on stone. A clean ringing tone meant the cut was true. A dull thud meant the angle was wrong. He taught the boy a trade, but he taught him more than a trade. He taught him patience. He taught him precision. He taught him that good work takes time. He taught him that you do not rush a foundation. He taught him that a house built on poor stone will fall, no matter how beautiful the walls look. Every parable Jesus would later tell about a builder, about a house, about a foundation, about a man counting the cost before he begins a project. All of it came from this small, dusty stone workshop on the side of Joseph's house. Mary heard it through the wall. She heard her son and her husband working together. The soft murmur of Joseph's voice teaching. The small, bright ring of the chisel. She would smile to herself as she kneaded the bread for the midday meal. Mary would bring lunch to the workshop. A small wooden tray, warm flatbread, olives, a little wine watered down for Joseph, a cup of water for the boy. She would set it on the workshop bench. She would sit on a small stool nearby. She would watch them eat. Sometimes she would stay for a few minutes. Sometimes she would go back to the house. The neighborhood women would gather at the well around midday, the cool relief of the brief shaded hour before the worst afternoon heat. Mary would walk over to the village well with her clay pitcher and stand with them. She would hear what the other women heard, the gossip of the village. Who was sick? Who had given birth? Whose husband had argued with whose brother? Who was preparing for which festival? And the other women would ask her about her son. How is Jesus, Mary? She would smile. She would say, he is good. He is growing. She would not say what she knew. She would not say what the angel had told her in her kitchen when she was 14. She would not say what the shepherds had said in Bethlehem. She would not say what Simeon had said in the temple when the boy was 40 days old. She kept all those things in her heart. The Gospel of Luke records that phrase twice. Mary kept all these things in her heart. It was her job for 30 years to know the secret, to carry the secret, to never tell it. She would walk back to the small stone house with her clay pitcher of cool water from the well. She would go to the workshop. She would refill the cup beside her son's bench. She would touch his shoulder. Then she would go back to her own work. Friday afternoon, the rhythm shifted. Joseph would close the workshop early, usually around the 3rd hour after midday. He would wash the stone dust off his hands and arms in the courtyard basin. He would change into a clean linen tunic. Mary would have been preparing the Sabbath meal since dawn. Lentil stew simmering on the small charcoal fire, fresh flatbread, roasted vegetables, a clay jar of wine, the small Sabbath lamp, a clay oil lamp with 2 wicks, set on the stone ledge ready to be lit. At sunset, the village fell silent. Every house in Nazareth, every workshop, every market stall, everything stopped at sunset on Friday. Mary would walk to the stone ledge. She would light the 2 wicks of the Sabbath lamp. She would cover her eyes with both hands. She would whisper the blessing in Hebrew that every Jewish woman in the world had been whispering for 1,000 years. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has commanded us to kindle the lights of Sabbath. The 3 of them would sit down at the small wooden table. Joseph would raise his cup of wine. He would chant the Kiddush. He would drink. He would pass the cup to Mary. She would drink. She would pass it to her son. He would drink. Joseph would break the bread. He would bless it. He would tear off a piece for Mary. He would tear off a piece for the boy. He would tear off his own piece. Then they would eat together in the warm, golden light of the Sabbath lamp. Every Friday night, for 30 years. The same blessings, the same wine, the same bread, the same family. The night before he died, Jesus would do this in a borrowed upper room in Jerusalem. Take bread, bless it, break it, pour wine, bless it, share it. He had been watching his stepfather do it every single Friday night of his life. Once a year, the family left Nazareth together. Passover, the greatest pilgrimage feast in the Jewish calendar. Luke chapter 2 specifies that Mary and Joseph went up to Jerusalem every year. They would have left Nazareth in early spring, joining a caravan of dozens of families from the village. The journey was 5 days of walking, 90 miles south through Samaria and into Judea. Picture the caravan on the road. Joseph walking with the men, Mary walking with the women, the boy, at whatever age, running ahead with the other children. The smell of pack animals, dust, sweat, food cooking at the evening camps. Mary would have carried a small leather satchel with the family's clothes and food. Joseph would have carried a larger leather bag with their offerings for the temple. A lamb for the sacrifice, the first fruits of the year. A pouch of silver shekels for the temple tax. Every evening, they camped in the fields beside the road. Joseph would set up the small lean-to of woven branches that gave their family a little privacy at night. Mary would cook a simple meal over a small fire. The three of them would lie on their sleeping mats under the stars. Jesus would ask questions. He always asked questions. What is that star called? Why does the moon change shape? Why do the Samaritans hate us? Why did the Romans build the road we are walking on? Why are some people rich and some poor? Mary and Joseph would answer. For 5 days, twice a year, going and coming, Jesus walked with his parents through the Holy Land. He saw every village along the road. He met farmers, merchants, priests, shepherds, beggars, soldiers, slaves. He learned the geography of his country. He learned the history of his people. He learned the rhythms of a journey. By the time he was 30, Jesus had walked from Nazareth to Jerusalem and back probably 50 times. He knew every village along the road by name. When he later began his ministry, he would walk those same roads again, teaching as he went. Back home in Nazareth, the evenings followed a pattern. At sunset, Joseph closed the workshop. Mary lit the oil lamp on the stone ledge. The three of them ate the evening meal together. Lentil stew, bread, a few olives, sometimes a small piece of dried fish. After the meal, Joseph would sit on the stone bench in the courtyard. Mary would clean up the meal. She would set out the dough for the next morning's bread. She would prepare the household for the next day. And Jesus would sit beside Joseph. He would ask his father questions about what they had built that day. He would ask about clients, about materials, about methods, about problems Joseph was working through. Joseph would talk. Mary heard them through the doorway. Her older husband, her growing son, talking together in the evening light. The voice of a man teaching the boy who would become a man. The voice of a stepfather passing on what he knew to the only son he would ever have. She would smile to herself as she set the bread bowl on the shelf. Sometimes, after Joseph had gone to bed, Mary would sit on the bench with her son. He would ask her questions about her own childhood, about her parents, Joachim and Anne, about the 9 years she had lived in the temple in Jerusalem, about the angel. She would tell him. Slowly, over years, she told him every piece of his own story. The angel, Elizabeth, Bethlehem, Egypt, the wise men, the shepherds, Simeon and Anna in the temple, everything she had kept in her heart since he was a baby. She told him, slowly, in pieces, on quiet evenings in the courtyard of the small house in Nazareth. By the time he was 25, Jesus knew exactly who he was, because his mother told him, on benches in courtyards, in the lamplight, year by year, story by story. Somewhere between the year Jesus turned 15 and the year he turned 25, Joseph died. The Gospels do not record when. We know it happened because every scene after Jesus is grown names Mary, but never names Joseph. We know it because at the cross, Jesus gave his mother into the care of John the disciple, something he would not have done if her husband were still alive. It happened in the small house. Joseph was an older man. He had been working with his hands for almost 60 years. His back ached. His chest had been tightening for months. One morning, he did not wake. Or perhaps he did wake, but he could not get up. Mary knelt beside him. She put her hand on his chest. She closed his eyes. She whispered the prayer over the dying that every Jewish wife had whispered for 1,000 years. Blessed is the true judge. Their son was a teenager, perhaps 15, perhaps 18, perhaps a young man in his 20s. He stood at the foot of his father's sleeping mat. He watched his mother close his stepfather's eyes. Then he walked to the workshop the next morning. He picked up Joseph's chisel, the one with the worn, smooth handle. He felt the weight of it. He went to work. He was the head of the household now. He was the man of the family. His mother was a widow. And for the next several years, until the morning he walked out of Nazareth toward the Jordan to begin his ministry, it was just the two of them, mother and son, in the small stone house, doing the same work Mary and Joseph had been doing for 20-something years. Mary would still wake first. She would still grind the flour. She would still bake the bread. She would still bring lunch to the workshop. Only now the man working at the bench was her son. Step back. See what those 30 years actually were. Two people. One small house, one small village, one small workshop, one small son. Mary taught him to pray. Joseph taught him to work. Mary taught him the scriptures she had memorized in the temple as a girl. Joseph taught him the trade he had learned from his own father. Mary fed him every meal of his life. Joseph blessed the bread at every Sabbath table. Together, the two of them raised the Son of God, not through anything dramatic, not through miracles, not through teaching, not through preaching, through ordinary daily life, through the morning rhythm, through the workshop, through the Sabbath table, through the Passover pilgrimages, through the quiet evenings on the courtyard bench, through 30 years of repeated, predictable, faithful, unglamorous, daily love. Every parable Jesus would tell about a vineyard, about a builder, about a sower, about a father who welcomes home a lost son, about a mother hen gathering her chicks, about bread broken and shared at a table, about a wedding feast, about a Sabbath rest. All of it came from this house, from these two people, from these 30 years. Mary and Joseph did not know they were raising the Son of God in any complicated way. They just knew they were raising their son. They woke him up in the morning. They fed him breakfast. They taught him a blessing. They walked him to the synagogue. They held his hand on the road to Jerusalem. They sat with him at the Sabbath table. Every parent who has ever set an alarm clock to make sure their kid eats breakfast before school. Every father who has ever taken his son to work to show him what work means. Every mother who has ever lit a candle at sunset and whispered a blessing over her family. Every parent who has ever stayed faithful to the slow daily work of raising a child. Every one of them is doing what Mary and Joseph did in a small stone house in Nazareth 2,000 years ago. Their work was not glamorous. Their work was not remembered. Their work was not recorded. But their work built the man who built the church. If this changed how you see Mary and Joseph, subscribe to the channel. We have a full library of their daily life, the morning bread, the Sabbath table, the workshop, the Passover walks, the evenings on the bench. Tell me in the comments. What hit you hardest? The morning grinding stone? The workshop where Joseph taught him to hold a chisel? The Sabbath lamp Mary lit every Friday night for 30 years? Or the courtyard bench where she told him his own story, year by year? I read every comment. I'll see you in the next one.